Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome back to yet another interview with IBR, an IBR exclusive. My name is Krish, and on my guest chair today is Eric de Boer from New Zealand. And Eric is the brains behind the Quasar Boxers, one of the most successful boxer kennels from New Zealand. Um, Eric registered the prefix or his journey, or started his journey in 1993, and has had you know and has not looked back ever since. He has so far bred um, or owned 36 champions, 31 of which have been bred by him. Several of his dogs have gone on to win the Best in Show awards in shows in both New Zealand and Australia, and as well as being an active exhibitor, a breeder and an exhibitor rather. Eric has also held various administrative roles with South Island Boxer Club. I don't know if I'm right in saying that that's your home club. He's held roles as from being a secretary on through to a president, as well as being on the committee the for an all breed club. Eric is also a specialist breed judge and is currently licensed to award CCs, challenge certificates, to the utility group, the non-sporting group, and the gun dog group. Now, before we proceed, I just want to invite folks that are watching this interview to put your questions in the comment section, and I will present them to Eric. And as always, the views that are presented by our guest are the views of the guest, and they don't represent the views of IBR or myself. Eric, thank you again for making time. How are you doing this afternoon?
Good, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. It's not probably my forte, but we'll see how we go.
Well, this is at the best chat, Eric, and I'm sure there's a lot of people wanting to know, what is the reason or what's the formula for success, and I think there's a lot for people to learn from your journey, and that's the point of this exercise. Eric, before we move into the interview, and you're the first guest that I'm interviewing from this part of the world. You call it down under. I don't know if that applies to New Zealand or is it just Australia?
No, I think they do both.
Okay, all right. Okay. For those people that are actually watching this interview, and there are people watching this interview from different parts of the world, either live or they get to watch this interview later, could you share how your journey started? I know that I've read on your website that you started off with a Doberman. That was your first breed, and the boxer came later. What prompted you to get into boxers?
Well, I've always been one of those kids that have always been obsessed with animals. So from, as soon as I can remember, I've always had, been drawn to animals, particularly dogs. We did get a Labrador when I was maybe 7 or 8, but that didn't last very long because my brother was allergic, so he had to go again. But then I was allowed to try again with another dog, and that was the Doberman. So I was taken to we have what we call ribbon parades here, so it's kind of like it's the same concept as a show, but it's for trainee judges, things like that, new people to get involved. So I was taken to one of those with my Doberman and won a ribbon and was hooked on dog showing from there. And I remember there was a couple that used to turn up at the shows with, a multitude of boxers, and I just really liked the look of the dogs. I'm drawn to that sharp outline, same as the Doberman, clean and crisp. And I really liked the look of the boxers, and that developed from there. So the Doberman was a little treacherous. He ended up biting my sister, so it was a wee wait before I was allowed to try again. So I got my first boxer at about 18.
Right, right.
And it's
So temperament
rest
would
is
have been one of
history.
your considerations when you decided to get a boxer.
Yeah, just I mean, when I was a child, I would take whatever dog I could get, basically. So
Mm,
whatever the family agreed on, and at the time it was a Doberman. So we all had input as to what we liked the look of. But
right,
yeah, really fell in love with the boxer. You
right.
know, that expressive face, can't go past it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Right, 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 right. Now, you also mentioned, and again, for those ones that are watching, you can actually, Eric has a really, has cataloged his journey rather well. There is a website that I believe is quite frequently updated. I even saw your litter advertisement, the litter that you had in May, or the plant breeding that you had in May of this year. So, for those people that are looking to um, know more about Eric after this interview, you can visit his website, Quasar Boxers. You can Google it and you can find that information. Um, Eric, I want to actually get to this aspect. I know the purpose of these interviews are to actually give an opportunity for up and coming fanciers to know what the formula for success is. And often the formula for success is decided by how you construct your learning curve or your mental blueprint of what your boxer should look like. But before we even get to the blueprint, can I ask you how you constructed your learning curve?
Um, Obviously, in New Zealand, we're quite remote, so there's not an awful lot of breeders around. Um, but I was one of those annoying people that would hone in on whoever would listen, and I would pick their brains on, all things boxer. And I would pick on anybody who was there to get as much
Mhm,
information as I could. Um, Reading books, the standard, any magazines you can get your hands on, just looking at the pictures, just getting an idea. So yeah, just basically talking to breeders locally, and then as you met people through shows and things, you would broaden that by talking to breeders overseas,
right,
sharing
right.
ideas. Um, yeah, so I've got a friend here who's always been very, had a good eye for a dog. She's grown up in the dog show world, and if you needed an outside, honest, unbiased opinion, she'll give it. You bounce ideas off each other and what you see
Mm,
and don't see,
mm.
virtues, faults.
Right, right,
That's how it's developed from there.
right, right. Did you have any mentors that actually also helped you with them? And what was the role of mentors, as you progressed in the sport? I know you had your first litter in 1993. That was your first litter, and I believe you had success in the very first litter as well. Um, what important role did
We were
mentors
lucky.
play in all of this? Sorry.
Um, so the people who I bought my first dog from, they were mentors at the time. They guided me into what dog to use, what to look for. Granted, we were 6 hours apart, so it was hard to show them the puppies. So it was done by photos and things like that.
Right.
And then there was also another well-known breeder here who was also a mentor, and I learned a lot from both lots.
Mhm.
Um, Developed my own ideas, which were, not always the same as my mentors. And then we had a show in 2000 with a judge from Holland, a
Mhm.
loner on Stink Shink, and we were lucky enough to win Best in Show and Reserve in Show with a father and daughter. And
Wow.
I talked to her afterwards, with what my views were and how they differed from, the mentors I'd had. And she just
Mhm.
basically said, "You're on the right track. Just follow your gut, do your own thing." And I haven't looked back since. Really, I've just done my own thing.
Right.
And I still ask friends overseas, and we run ideas past each other, or what do you think of this puppy? But it's not the same as being able to see them in the flesh. So,
True.
just keep what you think is right and go from there.
True.
Trust your gut.
True, very true, very true. And of course, I know that internet is made it possible, including this interview as well. I'm sitting in one part of the world, uh, and you are sitting in the other part, and we're chatting about our favorite chosen breed, the boxes. It's definitely actually reduced the gap or distance. You don't have to write letters. I know, and I have interviewed some breeders in the past. When I asked them the same question, they say they used to write letters. They used to write letters to people, or
Well, in
pick
the
up the
early
telephone
days,
and make a call. Sorry, Eric.
yeah, in the earlier days, I mean, we didn't have the internet either, so it was done by
Mm,
letters and photos. So
right.
I'm not that old,
True.
but we didn't have it. So
True. Very true. Um, I want to actually get to this. Get to this thing. Everybody, I think the standard is very interpretive. Our standard, our breed standard is very interpretive. We might have standards in different countries, but everybody, interprets the standard differently. The ones that interpret the brand standard well um, are typically more successful in in the exhibition of livestock or in the dog shows. What I'm actually curious to know is what was your initial mental blueprint of a boxer, and has that changed over time?
um, I think the most important thing is that initial outline, and our standard goes on about substance and elegance, and I think that's the main thing for me is that you can look at the silhouette of a dog, and appreciate the elegant, noble bearing. Um, I think all our blueprints change as you grow, and they continue to change probably slightly, um, as you learn more, develop more. Um, Over time, things hit home. You'll see certain aspects that you didn't see earlier on, um, and then that's all you see. Is how it's been for me. You know, Tight cat feet. I started with dogs with horrible feet, and I had a real bugbear about long toes, and then that's all you fixate on, and so just little things change over time, but the overall picture is still the same for me.
Right, right, right. I know that proximities, proximity to Australia which is definitely a much bigger, bigger, actually a much bigger, market, or maybe market is the wrong word. It's a much bigger segment in terms of dog shows. You've been successful in both Australia as well as in New Zealand. What has been the reason you think you would say you've been successful? Because is that because it's kind of similar in terms of the styles between Australia and New Zealand?
Mm, no, I don't think so. We still have quite a variance in styles, and even within our own countries. Um, I think the ones that have done well have been really well balanced dogs without exaggeration and sound moving. Um, yeah, it's hard to answer that one really. I think the ones that do well will do it well anywhere,
Right.
if they're well made and balanced.
Mhm. Right.
Um,
um, I,
and
I I know that.
I guess it depends on handling as well to a degree.
True, true. I want to actually understand more about New Zealand, Eric, and I think who better than to ask you. You've been that has been successful. Um, Do you have different styles in New Zealand, like in Australia as well? Do you actually have breeders who breed on the American style, primarily with the American style boxes, and English style boxes? I know that you have in your breeding leaned more towards the English style of boxes. Do we have so much of a variation in style? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, we do. We've got, there's to be honest, there's not many breeders left in New Zealand, so we are dwindling. But we've definitely got and had breeders that have completely different styles. Some tending more American, and some going more towards English, and then you've got everything in between. Yeah, it's quite, and some will have a
Mm,
different, they've obviously all got different viewpoints.
mm,
Some prefer the American, some prefer European, and some prefer the English looking.
right,
So kind of like a cross
right.
between all three.
Mm, right, 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 right. Um, Now, I want to get more into your, your actually your, you know, you know, your actually your journey as a breeder. I want to, of course, I want to actually talk about the other aspects of your journey as a judge as well. Um, but I want to actually ask you, if you were to describe, um, you know, some of the virtues that made you successful, um, what would you say they would be?
Um, to have an open mind, to not become kennel blind, so be able to see your dog's faults and virtues. Um, you have to accept defeat when things go wrong and try again. Um, it's, I mean, everyone that's watching or knows boxers know that it's a very hard breed to breed, very frustrating.
Hmm.
If you have a litter of say 7 or 8 and half of them are white, you've already knocked it down to 4 left. Um,
Mm,
Whereas Dobermans or Rottweilers, you've still got 8 to choose from at the end. So boxes
mm,
we are limited if you have whites. I think you have to be prepared to rehome if it hasn't worked out, like place them in
mm,
a pet home, um, accept defeat and carry on, try again.
right,
Um, it's yeah, that's how I look at it. I mean,
right.
it's very hard to let them go. Um, but you can't keep them all,
Mm, true, true, true.
and you can't
Agreed.
do them all
I
justice. If you've
mm.
failed, you can't afford to have a house full of.
And how many boxes? I know that also on your website you mentioned that you live in an acreage property. What's your kennel strength? What's your kennel strength in terms of the number of dogs that you have in your kennel?
At the moment, we've got 9.
Mm,
So, but we used to have, up to 14. Um,
mm.
are you talking ratio between dogs and bitches, or?
Yes, that is correct. Yes.
Okay, so we normally always have more bitches than dogs.
Mm,
Um, and I believe that, to the strength in a kennel is basically in its bitches as opposed to its dogs.
right.
Um, a lot of focus is always on the boys, but you need a decent
Mm,
girl to be able to get anywhere, really. Um,
right. Right.
and for
Right.
me, I've never kept a dog that wasn't good enough. I'll be
Mm,
more lenient on a bitch than a dog because you're not going to mate a mediocre dog to a good bitch,
right.
whereas you would do it the other way around.
True.
So
True.
I think a
Very
dog to
true.
stay at home needs to be exceptional.
Mm. Right, right. I know that looking at the dogs, you again. You actually on your website, one can actually look at all the champions that you've bred. I see that some of the biggest successes that you have had with your dogs have been a product of artificial insemination. Are you a big advocate of AI?
I am in that we don't have a choice here in New Zealand.
Mm,
We're so far removed, and like I said, there's not an awful lot of breeders left. Um, so our choices are limited. Yeah, so we don't really have a choice. We have to look abroad to bring in new blood or to find a dog that complements your bitch,
mm.
which turns out to be a very costly exercise, and quite a
Right.
gamble as well. If
Mm,
you spend the money and get nothing, or you get one white one, or
mm.
a dog that's just no good, um,
Right.
back to the drawing board. Whereas
Mm,
if there were
mm.
live options, that would still be my preference
Right.
overall.
True. True. Very true. Very
But
true.
I think
Uh,
with AI, you the world's your oyster. Basically, you can if you can find people that are willing to take a risk on you and send you semen, you've got more scope. Um,
mm,
it's finding those dogs and those breeders that are happy to cooperate and work with you to make it happen can
mm,
sometimes be challenging. So we're very grateful to the people that have helped us in the past with sending semen. So
mm.
yeah,
Right. Right. And I think
and of course the other thing is,
right. Now
sorry,
I know that you also
I
breed
think the other
livestocks as
thing,
well.
yeah, we've got
Sorry,
goats.
Eric, go. Mm,
We breed Boer goats.
right.
So not as passionate about those as the dogs, though.
Right, right, right. Now in terms of, and I know that AI actually makes breeding a little bit more scientific. Because of all the tests and all the tests leading up to the breeding that one has to do. Match. Looking at the cycles. Do the progesterone testing and all of that stuff. I know success rate, as you said, is actually a gamble, and you want to do all the things that you want to do, and of course there's a lot of planning involved. So my next question to you is actually about the planning for your litter. um, what are some of the criterias that you actually you know criterias that can you list some of the criterias in your thought process that goes into planning a litter?
Um, well, I like to look at the bitch and see what I want to change. So if she's a little upright in shoulder, I want a dog with better layback. Um, if she falls off in croup, I want a stronger croup. Just whatever I think needs fixing on the bitch is what I'm looking for in the dog. Um, and then I like to go for a dog that's correct as opposed to extreme in that area. I don't think if you're lacking angulation, you don't want an over-angulated dog because then you're going to get both, under and over, whereas you just want correct. So you want something that's correct, not overdone in the area you're trying to improve, is my opinion.
Right.
I also want healthy. So we do quite a bit of health testing. If it's a dog that I particularly like, or it's from a country that doesn't do the same testing, as long as my bitch has passed all the health tests, I'll give it a gamble and then carry on testing with the progeny from there.
Right.
Decent temperament, and that's the most challenging part when you're doing semen from abroad and you haven't seen the dog. You don't really know what you're going to get. And in regards to temperament and health. It's, so you really want
Right.
people to be honest and upfront with what their dog is like. If there is anything we should be concerned about, but at the end of the day, limited options, so you take a gamble. About, but
Right, true, very true. Now, in terms of, you mentioned a few things, and I want to actually expand on that. I want to ask you some questions about that. I know you mentioned about, confirmation is primary. Health testing is another one, which is important. What are all the other boxes that you would like to take off when you are planning a breeding?
sorry, say that again.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I know confirmation is one thing you mentioned, and you mentioned the health testing as well. Temperament, you mentioned about the temperament as well. How important are temperament, let's say fertility of a bitch? Like, for example, if you have a brood bitch in your kennel, how important is it, for, from a breeder perspective? From, you also breed livestocks as well, and since you actually want to breed, is there also a thought process in terms of breeding numbers? Would you like to actually have a litter? Do you also breed for litter size?
I would like to have decent size litters, but it seems to go in peaks and troughs. You've got a bitch that has a big litter, and then another big litter, and then her daughter, who you'd expect to take after her, doesn't. So there's
Mhm.
I don't know how that works. In an ideal world, I'd like them to be fertile to, maximize your chances, particularly when doing a frozen semen.
Mm.
But I haven't worked out that recipe yet.
Right. Of course, that would be I'm sure every breeder would want a litter of, which gives them more choices, right? A litter which is free of, any faults or disqualifiers, right? Something which will give them more.
Yeah.
Um, Now, actually, I want to ask you this: um, what would you consider to be a successful show litter? You plant a litter, the litter has arrived, and let's say, the litter is free of faults. What would constitute, a successful show litter for you?
One that has something that I want to carry on with. Um, something that's as good as, if not better than, the mother or the father.
Mm,
Um, and you see litters advertised as show puppies, but in reality, not the whole litter is ever a show litter, in my opinion. You're lucky to get one. If you have several in a litter, then you're extremely lucky. So, one that ticks all the boxes, you're not going to get a whole litter of those. And
mm,
I don't believe that anyone does. You might have the odd one, but where you get 4 or 5 good ones in a litter, but I don't think that's not how it normally goes. Not for
right.
me anyway. So yeah, I'm
No,
happy
you're
if I
being
get
absolutely.
something.
Mm. That's a
Sorry?
honest admission, Eric. No, that's a honest admission, right? I know letters are always advertised as show letters, right? So, but again, the probability is not, is always, some letters have more and some letters are less, but one can never tell that every puppy in the litter is a
No.
show letter puppy. So I understand that. Um, Now I know that, um, you know consistency is something that all breeders strive for. How important is a consistent litter for you?
Consistency for me means that you're on the right track and that you're stamped in a style or a type, um, and your breeding is reflecting that when you have a litter that looks typey to each other. If you've got all different, a mishmash of types, yeah, I think a consistent litter is better, because you know, when you keep something, you want to know that the siblings are half pie decent as well. If you've got a litter of horrible puppies and one flyer, you know, it still doesn't mean that it's going to carry on for you. So you really want consistency.
Mhm.
Um, I think you've got a better chance of moving forward with whatever you keep.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right. Would you actually say, Eric, that the hardest part in selecting a puppy um, is um, is actually picking the right age to pick the puppy, or is it what's your formula for success there? What are
I
you looking
think
for? In other words, what are you looking for when you're picking a show potential puppy?
I'm looking for a mini adult. So at around 8 weeks, I think what you see then generally is what you see in adult form. Um, you know, they change so much, but I don't know if anyone's heard of a woman called Pat Hastings with a puppy puzzle. So all the assessments are done at 8 weeks. Generally, I think it's reasonably accurate. What you get at 8 weeks is what you end up with as an adult, 9 times out of 10. So there is the odd one that throws a curveball, but generally, normally 8 weeks is what you see is what you get.
Right, right.
Right.
Um,
Um, but you
I,
get
I I
you get a
know.
feeling for what you know when. Sorry, when you've been breeding for a while, you normally know who it is pretty much at birth, which one you've got your eye on, and it generally is still the same one at 8 weeks. And I think
Right,
that would be the
right.
case for a lot of breeders.
Hmm. I want to actually ask you this. I want to go back to the question that you mentioned, right? You mentioned in your earlier answer response that you know the the confirmation is number one. Health testing is one of the criteria that you tick the box on. Now the litter has arrived, and now you are actually selecting the next big winner or the hopeful, show hopeful. Um, and let's say you have more than one in that litter. And in making your choice um, between two puppies, how important would you say temperament is? That outgoing temperament or that temperament in a puppy. Would that actually tilt the table in a puppy's favor if everything else is a constant? Or let's say, for example, a puppy which is extremely gifted in conformation, and you have a puppy which is not as gifted but has got a better temperament. How would you make a decision?
Depending on how close they are, if they're close, then the better temperament is a no-brainer. Um, if the lesser puppy is still, you know, close to being up to par, but has a far superior temperament, I would probably still swing for the temperament. Um, you know, I like a bomb-proof boxer, and I can't stand the timid, scatty ones. Particularly if you've got numbers, because they make everyone else nuts. um, so I, I would keep a stable temperament probably over a better constructed puppy
Right.
for ease of living with.
Mm,
Um, yeah,
right.
we've had some
And since you have
scatterbrains over the years, and that's put me off. So I always look for it.
Right, right. I know that it's not fun having a dog which is extremely different in temperament in a kennel, when with all dogs being consistent and having a manageable temperament. One dog can ruin the chances, right? It can actually turn the tables. So I totally get what you're saying. You want a
Yeah.
dog which you're comfortable living with. So that's an important criteria. What are some of your, I know that you know you cannot have, you cannot have like all the dogs that you want in your kennel. You have to place your dogs with people. How do you what are some of the things that you have in mind when you pick your prospective show home for your puppies?
Um, to be honest, in New Zealand, not many people ask for show puppies. They just want a pet. Um, so all show inquiries for me generally are from abroad. Um, so I am hesitant to send abroad unless I know what sort of home the puppy's going to. Um, at the end of the day, it's still the dog's welfare is most important to me. I don't want to send a dog to the other side of the world to be, a breeding machine or anything like
Hmm.
that.
Right,
Quality of
right.
life is still, paramount importance to me. Um, so I'm comfortable sending to people I know and know I know that the dog will have a good life. If I don't know them, then I don't think I could send. I'd need to get to know
Hmm.
them.
Right, right. True,
Um,
very true. Um, I actually have, slightly, I'm going off tangent here, but that's leading to my question too. I have this friend in Australia, a good friend of mine, and she actually might be watching this interview too. You might know her, Eileen Custance. Eileen, if you're watching, hi. Um, Eileen actually said to me once, she said, "Do you actually feed your dog? What do you feed your dog? Do you feed your dog kibble? If you're feeding kibble, forget it. I'm never going to send you a dog." You know, she's extremely passionate about what she feeds the dog, and she's found the most success feeding the dog with raw diet. What have you found success with?
I've tried it all, and now I do both. I do dry and raw. So I think, you can get quite. For me, I didn't see any advantages either way. When I tried to do solely raw, it turned into a lot of work, um, and I was still not convinced that it was done right for me. We had a dog we tried to freeze, and he wasn't worth freezing, so I had to put him on supplements for 3 months, and then he was fine. So whereas when I use, a commercial food, I had no problems with semen quality or anything like that. So it made me question, what what was right or not. So now I'm lazy and I go for both. So for
Right. Right, right, right. True,
myself.
true, true. Again,
Yeah.
whatever works for you, right? That's the most important thing. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. I totally agree. How is the
So as
show
far as
scene?
sending puppies to someone who only wants to do raw or kibble,
Mhm.
so I think we've got a
Oh yes,
delay.
yes, we do have it. We do.
I was saying, I don't mind what people want to see.
Right, right, right. No, I get it. Thank you for that. I know there is a delay. I know it's the distance maybe is the factor. If we are too far away, Eric, that could be the reason. Um, Jokes apart. Um,
Yeah.
Now, in terms of breeding, right? In terms of breeding, I know that um, you're breeding to produce the next big winning dog, or you're breeding to actually further improve the breed. To breed the next better dog than what you already have. What do you feel to be some of the ethical considerations of breeding?
Um, when you say ethical, what can you expand on what you mean by that?
No, 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 absolutely, for sure, for sure. I know that in terms of the number of litters that we plan, that we breed, um, we also have the responsibility to breed animals that are sound in I don't want to be answering your question, but I'll just give you a little bit more context. I just want to say, what are some of the things that, there are commercial breeders, and there are breeders that are show breeders, right? So breeders that are actually, is there, what differentiates them according to you, the ones that are actually, because you don't want to be selling to somebody who is actually running a puppy mill. So you're going to ask them questions about what are they going to be using it, what is the point of them getting a dog, what do they have in mind, and all those questions are there, right? So what are some of those ethical considerations you feel that breeders have, with the breed?
Well, for me, I always think that you're bringing the animal into the world, so you're responsible for that animal and its welfare and its well-being. So I always ask lots of personal questions. What do they want it for? Where is it going to be housed? Is it allowed inside? Do they have children? Do they want to breed? Do they want to show? How old are they? Do they have children? I've had all sorts of experiences over my time that makes me ask, more questions. As you get a young couple, they want a boxer, then they have a child, and suddenly boxer has to go. So I'd prefer it if they already knew what they were getting before they, whereas a new time owner, I would think twice in that scenario, because once bitten, twice shy, as the saying goes. So or young people, if they want to do an OE and then the dog needs to be rehomed, all that sort of thing comes into it for me. If they want to breed, then I want to know why they want to breed. And if it's so the children can experience, then it's a bit cross for me. They don't get it, because that's not the right reason for breeding in my mind.
Right.
So, and I think when you say differentiate, I think those that are breeding for the right reasons generally will keep something if it's good enough. I mean, it doesn't always work. But if you're breeding litter after litter after litter and never keep anything, then that tells me you're just breeding for, the pet market or the market.
Right.
So
Right. Commercial gains. Yeah.
unethical
True.
for me.
True.
Yeah.
True. Um, Eric, I want to actually ask you this now. I know that you would have looked at the breed. You'd have read a lot of books about the breed before you started in boxers, and you also look at the breed all over the world. Not just in your country, but also across the world. Um, there's a lot of, and we also talked a bit about style. We talked about the variance in style. European style, English style, American style, different style. Um, there is actually, it's stated that the appearance of the breed is decided by the purpose the breed was bred for. It's the purpose, and the appearance follows. Do you think the purpose of the breed in different countries has played a role in how the breed has evolved in those countries?
I find that a hard question. I think possibly, but the only thing I can think of is with Europeans, where they have to have the working titles. That's the only country I know of that were, the only countries that to me breed for slightly different things, as far as what they were bred for. I mean, nowadays, to be honest, they're only pets or show dogs, aren't they? We don't breed for a purpose as such anymore. Only that they should be able to do the task they were bred to do. So, I think possibly in Europe, that would be the only thing where they breed for the working titles. Yeah. But I still don't see that the extremes that you see over there, how that helps being a working dog.
Right.
Yeah, I
Right.
don't know.
Right. Right. Um, I want to actually talk about New Zealand and Australia. You know, uh, you know, I've interviewed quite a few people in Australia, and people actually in Australia, there's quite a bit of deviation, different styles that are there, but people also blend dogs in there, right? Like for example, they blend English with American, or they blend English with European styles. Um, what are your thoughts about blending?
Um, I think each, I don't know if you want to differentiate between them all, but they've all got different virtues to add. So you know, for me, Americans, I love that short coat, the nice elegant neck, um, that real sharp showmanship. Um, some of the European dogs, that look of power. So I think blending is fine. I don't know if it always works. We've got American lines and European lines, but predominantly English lines. So um, you definitely notice them. For us, we've noticed a definite difference in temperament using European line, and it's already, it's diluted. So I can imagine some of them might be hard work if they were fully European. That's just my personal experience.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, they just seem, you can tell that they've been bred for, a different reason.
Right. Right. Um, I was looking at the breed standards the other day, and I think I asked you this question in one of our chat conversations as well. Um, the Australian breed standard. Um, I asked, my question to you was, if if actually is it the common breed standard for Australia and New Zealand, and you said it was not. Um, but I want to actually ask you this: due to the success that you have, had in both the countries, in both your country and in Australia as well, um, and also some of the dogs from Australia might have come into New Zealand as well. So, do you feel New Zealand and Australia have contributed to each other's growth with the breed?
Definitely earlier on, um, before AIs were commonplace, I think, they sent a lot between breeders between the two countries. So those that could afford it would import live animals and then share progeny with other breeders over this side, and vice versa. But I think now there's not much happening between the two countries. With AI available and things, I think people just go directly to where they want to go. Um,
Mm,
so yeah, there's not much sharing between the two countries anymore. It
right,
doesn't appear to be
right,
anyway.
right. Um, Eric, I want to actually ask you this question about
Definitely.
right. I want to actually ask you about this. The least, I was looking at I was looking at some of the New Zealand boxes. I actually found that I actually learned that starting from 2019, tail docking has been banned in New Zealand. So meaning that you're going to have natural tail boxes in New Zealand, just like it has been in Australia for the last 12 or 13 years. Um, how do you feel this is actually impacting? This is going to impact the breed in New Zealand? Is it going to get? Is it going to actually drive people away from the breed?
I think like
Because
initially we thought it would, but I think everyone who was here before the tail docking stopped is still active now. So if you're passionate about the breed, I don't think the tail is enough to be able to stop you wanting the dog. For me, I obviously prefer them docked, but I still love the breed with the tail. And I think, earlier on, those that were docked still had the upper hand in the ring. Judges would still be drawn to that sharper outline that you have with a docked tail. But as everyone's getting used to it, I think it's starting to even out again.
Right. You actually answered my next question. I actually was going to ask you if a docked boxer, which I'm sure, which is something which is won in 2018, which is still competing, does it have an edge? But you answered that question. Thank you for that. Now, in terms of the next question that I was going to about to ask you, which is basically this. There's a dog that I saw on your website. The call name for this dog was Olive. I'm talking about Quasar, highly contagious. Your first grand champion in New Zealand. Can you tell us about her story? With a grand champion actually is, I believe, 50 cc's to become a grand champion in New Zealand, and it's not easy. And she was a special dog, and I don't know if I can call, if you would call her a once in a lifetime dog. Maybe she was, being a bitch. What are your memories of her?
She was definitely a once in a lifetime dog, I think. Having had her, that's what I constantly look for when I have puppies, is to try and get another Olive. So far, obviously, I haven't had another one, but yeah, that's set the bar quite high for me. So I mean, she wasn't perfect, but she pretty much had it all. The temperament, unexaggerated, balanced sound. She was just beautiful. So she, she won all for the grand champion title in New Zealand, you have to have the 50 cc's plus 3 all breeds best in shows under different judges, which is quite a big ask for the dog here. And she already had all her best in shows before she had the required 8 cc's that you need to become just a normal champion. So yeah, she was the dream, really, for me. And she produced as well, so it was a win, a bonus that she did both.
Right. She did both in the shorting and as well in the litter box as well.
That's right, and that doesn't always happen. In fact, it rarely happens that they do that well in both. So
right. True. A breeder's dream. I certainly wish, she brought a smile to your face, and I certainly hope that she, you get another once in a lifetime dog. No, maybe a once in a 5-year dog. You breed some dogs like that more often.
Yeah, it needs to be like
bring up
5 years. Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True. Very true. Eric, you actually also started the journey of becoming, of working towards a judge. You started that journey in 2007. And you actually are, like I stated in my introduction, you are a specialist breed judge, and you're currently licensed to judge CCs in the utility group, non-sporting group, and the gun dog group. My question is, while judging your dog, while judging the breed, your chosen breed, your favorite breed, you also get to judge dogs that deviate so much from your mental blueprint. This is what you think is an ideal boxer should look like, but there's a dog which deviates so much from the breeds, from your mental blueprint. But it's a good dog. But how easy or difficult does judging become when something like that happens?
I think it's always easier to judge a quality lineup than it is a poor lineup. You know, if you've got quality dogs, then it's easier to find something. When you've got them all below par and you think, what am I going to do here? So I think you need to keep your picture in mind. And I think as a breeder versus a judge, you're looking for different things. Like when you're judging, you need to keep that blueprint, the standard, and you go for whatever is the closest to what meets those, you know, those marks. When you're a breeder, you're looking for, you know, different virtues almost that, oh, that could fix this on my bitch, or this could do that, or, you know, so it's kind of two different hats. And you need to keep just the judge's hat on when you're in the ring. As opposed to looking at different things that you might be looking for yourself or preferences.
Right.
So you want to find the typiest basically, and then go from there.
True. Very true. I'm sure, Eric, you would have heard about this term called the hypertype, right? The type which, a dog which is actually not conforming totally to the breed type, which looks slightly different, and it's an exaggeration. It looks different, and that is actually how the breed has evolved. Like for example, the dogs have every 10 years have changed. I would say, give or take, every 10 years the breed actually changes in how they look. Way the dog looked back in, let's say, in the 1980s is not how the dog looks now in 2021. But having been involved with a breed, both as a breeder as well as a specialist judge, who do you think is more responsible for perpetuating hypertypes?
I think both. Obviously, if you're judging, you can only judge what's put in front of you, or what's entered under you. But you need to stay true to the breed and the standard, and not award those extremes. But then again, as a breeder, you're the one that's supposed to be most passionate about your breed. You need to stay true and try and stop those extremes creeping in. So it's a hard one. I think both are to blame to a degree. I think judges need to stay true to their convictions and not award, and breeders need to remember that they're there to try and preserve the breed and improve the breed, and not go for fashions or fads or whatever else because they want to win. So, I mean, we all want to win, don't get me wrong, but it's more about preserving the breed, or it should be.
Right. True. Very true. I want to ask you another question here on the same topic. Is it easy to show, or is it easy to judge a boxer? Which one do you think is more easy?
I prefer showing, I think. Well, like I said, everyone likes to win, so it's nice to be on the end of the lead when you're winning. When you're judging, you can't please everybody, and you can feel it, you can see it in their faces. So you've got to try and switch off to what people think or are saying, and just do and stay true. Don't try and be don't be swayed, basically. So therefore, it's easier to be on the end of the lead than to be in the middle of the ring and feel the pressure.
Right. Right, right. Um, Another judging question for you. When it actually, I know you're gonna, I know the answer to this question, but I would still ask you this question. What's your favorite breed to judge, and why?
Boxes, boxes, of course. So
Okay.
yeah, that's the reason I started the journey. So I just wanted to judge boxes, but to get appointments around this side of the world, the more groups you've got, the more chances you've got of an invite. So to judge boxes.
Right,
So
right, right. True. That
don't
that
tell all
is
the other breeds that, but
no, that's exactly what you told me before. You told nothing different, so that's what I heard you say. So that's nothing different for me to tell. Um, how have you grown as a judge? As in, in terms of in your journey so far, how have you grown as a judge? What are some of the learnings that you have as a judge? And this is for all the aspirant judges or for people that want to take up judging. Um, you know, for the breed. What are some of the things that you've learned as a judge?
um,
Or or let me rephrase the question for you,
trust your
Eric.
own. Yeah,
What are the do's and don'ts of judging?
you want to stay true to yourself and to what you think is the best, and not look at who's on the end of the lead. Um, you know, I don't know what it's like in most countries, but in our own country, you feel the pressure when you know the exhibitors. So it's easier to judge where you don't know anyone, um, and can't be swayed that way, um, or feel the pressure to be swayed. Um, yeah, you need to stay honest and true and judge only the dog. Um, and I think as you do it more, all the negative comments and stuff that you get from those you didn't please, they just wash off eventually. Yeah, you can't please everyone, and you're doing your own thing to the best of your ability. Really,
Right,
is what I've learned. Try not to take it all personally, which was hard in the beginning.
right, right. True, true, very true. Um, you've been extremely patient with me. Thank you so much for that. I just have a few more questions for us before we wrap up the interview. Um, I want to actually ask you this: as you look back, Eric, on your journey so far, 28 years in the breed. I wish another 40 more years in the breed for you, or at least
I'll be
conservatively.
dead by then.
Sorry. What do
I
you
said I'll be
count?
dead by then.
Well, you never know. You never know. Um, I've got another question around that. You got to wait for that. What do you count to be a significant contribution to the breed as you look back?
I'm in it.
Okay.
You didn't like that answer?
No, that's fair enough. Fair enough. No, absolutely. I said, in in
No,
in
that's right.
in the middle of all the dwindling people in the breed, you're actually contributing to the breed. No, that's a good answer. But you can expand on that if you want. Hello, Eric.
No, I like to think that I'm doing. What's happening? I like to think that, and I'm happy to help new people. Um, in fact, I'd love there to be more new people wanting to get involved. Um, and I think staying true to what I think is right, and trying my best to carry on how I perceive them to be, I think is basically my contribution. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. And My penultimate question to you, Eric, is this. This is also a favorite question. I think it is, at least for the ones that are listening to it, and maybe not so much with a guest, but I still will ask you this. Um, if you went back in time, if you went back in time, you've heard this question in the previous interview, I'm sure, right? Um, have you, Eric?
Yeah, I've heard it.
You have. Okay, all right. But I'm
Yeah.
not going to ask you that. It is the time travel question, but with a twist. If you went back in time, I'm not going to ask you which dog you're going to bring back with you, but I'm going to ask you what is what is you know would you do things differently?
Would I do things differently?
Yeah.
No, not necessarily. I would possibly not have put dogs first in my life and concentrated on other things in life more. um, you put a lot of things on the back burner when you're obsessed with this hobby. And I think I should have, you know, pursued things in a different order. Um, Maybe not put dogs first and concentrate on other areas in life first. But when you're a teen, you can't see the big picture, and everything you do is for the dogs, um, which is possibly not healthy.
Right.
um,
Right.
so yeah, I would probably do things in a different order.
Mm.
But as far as the breeding side of things goes, no, I think I'd probably, you'd still do the same sort of thing.
Very good. Very good. Perfect. Thank you so much for that. Um, what's your piece of advice, Eric, to any up and coming fanciers?
To, talk to as many people as you can, take in as much information as you can, but ultimately to make your own opinion on what you see as right or close to the standard. Um, I think with social media nowadays, it's very easy to be swayed. I've got a wee bugbear about that. You see well-respected people and they'll post a picture of a puppy and you think, yikes, that should be in a pet home. But everyone's going, wow. And I don't think that's good for the breed, because you're swaying, less experienced people thinking, oh, that must be right because everyone's saying it is. Probably a can of worms, but that's one of my bugbears.
Right.
You know, if you're a respected breeder, you need to watch how you're influencing those that are still learning or just starting. And if it's not good enough, it's not good enough. Don't try and make out that it is. Probably get in
Very
trouble
good.
now.
Very good. Very good. Very good. No, aptly said. Thank you. Thank you. That's the you said a lot in with that response. Thank you so much. That Eric actually was all the questions I had. I want to first of all thank you for being extremely generous with your time. I know that this was something. This I was relentless in my pursuit to actually get you on the interview chair. Thank you for agreeing to actually do this interview. Much appreciated. No, for those ones that are watching or just missed the first part of this interview, this is going to be available online on YouTube. I will be uploading this interview shortly, so feel free to actually watch this interview again and also share this interview with your fellow fanciers who might have missed this interview. And before we conclude the session, Eric, do you have any parting words?
No, just thank you very much for the opportunity. I hope people thought it was all right. Got something out of it. Yeah, just thank you for the opportunity, and I'm honored to have it.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you so much for your time. And for those ones watching, have yourself a wonderful evening. And we have another session scheduled for in the morning, less than 12 hours from now. That's going to be a panel discussion between breeders from two continents, one from Belgium, Ingmar Suwen, and from the other from United States, Rhonda Camp. So interesting discussion in store. And I'm just going to quickly sleep and maybe think about boxes and come right back to host that session as a moderator. Thank you so much. Have yourself a wonderful evening, everybody. Thank you.
Okay.